Starting off at number 10, we have the killer body fumes. In 1994, Gloria Ramirez was rushed to hospital with breathing problems and ended up dying from heart and kidney failure. While they were trying to save her, the ER staff inserted an IV drip into her and drew some blood. They said it smelt like ammonia, and some people reported her skin being covered in a strange oily layer. The nurse then noticed strange particles floating in the blood. Soon, she fainted. Then the doctor left the room, sat down, and also fainted. Next, a respiratory therapist in the room fainted. People started dropping like flies. When they woke up, they couldn't stop shaking and their skin felt like it was on fire. The ones who were closest to Gloria Ramirez ended up being hospitalized for days, but out of the 37 emergency room staff members, 23 of them experienced some of these strange symptoms. Scientists have struggled to put forward a theory as to why Gloria Ramirez's body was just so toxic and how fumes from her blood were just so dangerous. Next up at number 9 now, we have Armin Meiwes. This story is not really for those with a delicate stomach, so look away if that's you. In the early 2000s, Armin visited a little known website called the Cannibal Cafe. He posted a list looking for a well-built 18 to 25-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed. His words, not mine. Yeah, normally young adults want good jobs, they want to travel, maybe find a partner and be slaughtered and then consumed, apparently. Amazingly, a few people actually replied and then backed out, presumably when they realized it was insane, but one man, Bernard Brandes, actually went to Armin's house. They then made a video of Armin cutting off his penis. He then tried to cook it and eat it, but it got burnt apparently, so he fed it to his dog. This happened. As Brandes bled to death in the bathtub, Armin gave him alcohol and 20 sleeping pills and then read a Star Trek book for 3 hours. He then kissed him and then killed him and then froze the flesh for 10 months while he lived off it and ground the bones into flour. Amazingly, he was only caught when he posted online the following year looking for his next meal and victim and bragged about what had happened before. He is now serving life in prison. Next up at number 8 now, we have Heaven's Gate. In 1974, a group called Heaven's Gate formed in the United States. They believed the Earth was about to be recycled. All life would apparently be wiped out and the only way for them to be saved was to evacuate the planet and get onto a spacecraft that was travelling behind an approaching comet. How? By committing mass suicide. This UFO would then apparently take their souls to a level of existence above human. On March 26, 1997, their bodies were found at a rented California ranch. 38 members had killed themselves by taking a lethal cocktail. Police found all of them lying neatly in their own bunk beds. Their faces were covered with a square purple cloth. All of them had black sweatpants and joggers on, brand new Nike shoes and armband patches that said Heaven's Gate Away Team. This was not a joke. Tapes that they had recorded before the mass suicide can be found on YouTube right now. Coming in at number 7, we have Facebook from Beyond the Grave. In 2014, Reddit user Nate SW shared a very chilling story. On the 7th of August 2012, his girlfriend Emily was killed in a car crash. They had been dating for 5 years. 13 months passed with Nate trying to move on from that, and then on September 4th, 2013, he got a Facebook message from her. At first, Nathan presumed it was from Emily's mother, who he had given the Facebook password to. A few more months passed and then the messages continued again, making references to some of their past conversations. Then he started getting notifications from her where she would tag herself in his pictures in empty spaces where she should have been. No matter how many times he changed the password, the messages just kept coming. Eventually, she started to say she was cold, really cold. She was freezing and didn't know what was happening to her. To this day, Nathan still doesn't know if this was some sort of sick joke or a chilling message from beyond the grave. In at number 6 now, we have Joseph Metheny. Before our story even begins, Joseph had already killed 10 people in a number of different grisly ways. The victims were usually crack cocaine addicts or prostitutes that he would hack to death with an axe under a bridge. One witness, who was just fishing nearby, got beaten to death with a steel pipe simply for just seeing a murder take place. Joseph was still not caught, and so he opened his own burger stand. like you do. Now, whenever he killed a new prostitute, he would use the meat in his burgers that he would sell to people. When he was eventually caught and arrested, Metheny told police, "I would also sell real roast beef and pork sandwiches. They were very good. The human body taste was very similar to pork. If you mix it together, no one can tell the difference." Next up at number 5 now, we have the cell phone stalker. In 2007, a family in Washington state started getting unwelcome calls on their phones. Throughout the night, the calls threatened to kill their children, the grandparents and the pets, and creepily, they would also get voicemails of their own private conversations, and even one where they were talking to a police detective about this whole thing. Disturbingly, when the phone call's origins were traced, they seemed to come from the family's own phones, even when they were switched off. Their phone company said this should not be possible. At one point, even the neighbor got a call. She was apparently slicing limes in her kitchen when the stalker called and said he preferred lemons. No matter how many times they changed their phones, the calls just kept coming. The stalker was never caught, and in the end, the family said if they go a day without a call, that's a good day. Okay, moving on to the number 4 spot now, we have the girl in the box. In 1977, 20-year-old Colleen Stan was kidnapped while hitchhiking from her home in Oregon. Her captors, Cameron and Janice Hooker, took her to the Californian hills and kept her in a sort of coffin-like box. Colleen would often spend 23 hours in this box at a time, only being allowed out to be beaten, raped and tortured. This went on for 7 years, from 1977 until 1984. At that point, Janice Hooker, one of the captors, finally went to the police and told them everything. Colleen was rescued, reunited with her family, and underwent a lot of therapy to try and live a normal life again. I'm amazed that anyone could do that after spending 7 years locked in a coffin for sometimes 23 hours a day. Next up at number 3, we have the Hinterk Murder. In 1922, an entire family living at the Hinterk farm in Germany were killed by wounds from a pickaxe. The parents, widowed daughter, her children, and even the housekeeper were all found dead. 4 of them were in the barn and 2 of them were in their beds. Here's the really creepy thing. The murderer apparently continued to live at the farm with the family's dead bodies there for some time afterwards. Police knew this because when they arrived, the animals were still being fed. Neighbors apparently saw smoke coming from the chimney, and also the dog was tied up outside the barn. It gets even creepier. Before their murders, the family had reported hearing footsteps in the attic, seeing footprints in the snow that led from the woods to the house but not back the other way, and they also saw claw marks on the door of the tool shed where they kept the pickaxe that was used to kill them. The crime was never solved. Coming in at number 2 now, we have The Waking Dead. This story comes from Honduras, where a girl called Nacy Perez went into a panic attack after hearing gunshots. When she started foaming at the mouth, a priest was called to exorcise her of an evil spirit. Soon though, she was pronounced dead in hospital and buried in her wedding dress at the cemetery. A day after the funeral, her husband was visiting her grave when he heard banging and screaming coming from inside the concrete tomb. A graveyard worker confirmed hearing the exact same thing. The family arrived, smashed open the tomb and took her to hospital. Her cousin said she put her hand on her body and she was still warm. She had scratches on her forehead and bruises on her fingers. It looked like she had tried desperately to get out of the casket and had hurt herself. She was pronounced dead again at the hospital and buried for a second time. Some people say she didn't actually die the first time and instead might have woken up inside the coffin and died from lack of oxygen. And finally now, at number 1, we have Rodney Alcala. This man is a convicted rapist and serial killer who has been sentenced to death for the murder of 5 women between 1978 and 1979. The scary thing is, it's thought he could have killed as many as 50. Right in the middle of this killing spree, Rodney Alcala was accepted as a contestant on the dating game TV show where men compete for a date with a bachelorette. In the TV footage, it's incredibly disturbing to see this man flirting with women as he had just killed 2 women recently.
I'm called the banana. and I look really good.
Not long after, Rodney Alcala would go on to kill 2 more women. Horrifyingly, he actually beat the other contestants. The only sliver of light in this dark story is the fact that the woman that he won the date with eventually refused to go on the date with him because she found him creepy. I hope someone studied her superhuman senses because that woman was on the ball.
Starting off with number 10, the house with the animals in the walls. That literally sounds like a name of a horror movie that already exists. In 2015, the Bredzuis family was renovating their home and was planning on re-insulating their house. However, when they tore open the walls, they discovered it was lined with bodies of dead animals. These animals were wrapped in newspaper from the 1930s and 40s. Along with these animals, there were spices, artifacts, and other miscellaneous items in the wall. Apparently, all these items can be linked to powwow or Dutch magic, which is used to treat ailments or gain protection. Some of the items in the wall were linked to spells that promote the care of livestock, treatments for illnesses, and even used to conjure demons. They were living with these animals in the walls for several years, which in turn caused some of the family members to become ill and caused a constant odor in the house. Now, let me paint you a picture of the movie I'm imagining. Family moves into a house, maybe it was cheap real estate, but as they are living there, strange things start to occur, including them hearing scratching from inside the walls and seeing apparitions of demons. Eventually they tear open the walls to investigate and find the animals, but also unleash some of the dark magic that was used in the time. I think I deserve an Oscar already.
Coming at number 9 now, we have The Watcher. In 2014, a family in Westfield, New Jersey were forced to flee their brand new $1.3 million home after receiving letters from someone who called themselves The Watcher. Now, The Watcher had told the new family that the home had been in his family for decades and that they were put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. Now, if that doesn't sound creepy enough, wait till you hear this. The Watcher then asked if the family's children had found what's in the walls yet, and also said, "I am pleased to know your names now and the names of the young blood you have brought to me." Quite rightly, the family left soon after that, and the police never found out who the Watcher really was. No new letters have been sent, and it's thought the Watcher is just waiting to watch the new arrivals.
Next, we have the Witch Elm Tree at number 8. In 1943, 4 boys in Stourbridge, England located something odd in an old witch elm tree. Upon climbing up and looking in the tree, one boy discovered that a decomposed body of a young woman was stuffed inside. A gold wedding ring was on her left hand, while her right hand was sawed off. The hand was later discovered buried just below the tree. This woman was apparently 35 years of age and had apparently been in the tree for 18 months. Now, when this body was discovered, no one knew who it belonged to. That was until graffiti started appearing all around town. The graffiti wrote, "Who put Lubella down the witch elm?" This appeared on a wall in Old Hill. Then in Birmingham another message appeared. Then another message at Witchbury Hill that read, "Who put Bella in the witch elm?" No one knows who was writing these messages, but it was assumed that they knew the victim as they identified her by her name. This message kept appearing all throughout England and Europe. Over time, police began to lose evidence and even misplaced her body. The case has never been solved, but the graffiti can still be found on some alleyways. At number 7, we have The Voices. Now, this woman was using a sleep app that basically runs all throughout the night and starts recording when it detects noise. In the morning, she was going through the recording when she could hear a voice talking. In the recording, you can hear a bunch of clicks that sound almost like footsteps, and then you can hear the woman say, "What are you doing?" That's in fact her own voice, but she doesn't remember saying that at all. What's even creepier is after that you hear the ghostly voice say, "Nothing." Like, they actually say the word nothing, they don't say nothing. And then you hear what sounds like either, "Oh, be still," or "That's them." Either way, it is terrifying. And throughout the recording, the weird clicking noise is present. Now, she said that she eventually moved from that house and everything was fine. Until her son started talking about seeing a dark figure with no face. Her son also kept asking where Ho was. She thinks that it's a spirit that he was seeing that apparently followed them to their new house. I think this would make a good movie. Just imagine a woman starts using this app to monitor sleep talking patterns when she discovers she's not the only one in the house. Dun dun dun. In our sixth spot, we have Hotel Monte Vista. The Monte Vista Hotel in Flagstaff, Arizona is known to be home to multiple paranormal entities. The hotel opened in 1927 and people have seen several ghosts, including a ghost of a bellboy, bank robber, and even a dancing couple. If you stay in room 220, then apparently the TV will change channels on its own. Even some people have felt cold hands touching them while they sleep. Now, the ghost of the bellboy will apparently knock on the door and even say room service, but will not be there when anyone checks. He could at least leave some food or something for them. Some guests have seen him outside of room 210 and described him dressed in an old-fashioned uniform with brass buttons. Now, in 1970, 3 men robbed a bank near the hotel, and afterwards they celebrated their robbery at the bar in the hotel. However, one robber was shot and bled to death in the hotel. People say that they see bar stools and drinks moving on their own. It is also said that 2 women were murdered in room 306 in the 1940s, and during the night they will place a hand over the guests' mouths and throats, making them wake up and not being able to breathe. They mainly target male guests. That's because they were murdered by male individuals. There's also a little boy that roams the hotel, and even a chair that rocks by itself in room 305. Sounds of baby crying in the basement and a dancing ghost couple. And the list continues. From its creepy history to the countless ghosts that roam the hall, this hotel would be a great basis for a movie. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Smiley Face Killer. The Smiley Face Killer got its name from leaving graffiti smiley faces at the scene of every crime. Now, they have made a documentary on it, but I think it would also make a good horror film. The killing started in 1997 and ended in 2008. Now, all the victims were white, college-aged men. All of these victims were drowned and found with a smiley face graffitied nearby. Some people believe that they were murdered out of jealousy from being good looking or good in school or athletic. Now, some of the murders happened on the same night but in different areas, so detectives even believe that it was done by an organization or group of individuals. The cases also have other weird similarities. In 1997, Patrick McNeil was last seen drinking at a Manhattan bar when found drowned in the New York harbor. In 2016, Matthew Genovese was last seen at a pub drinking and was found drowned as well. Both of these victims were drinking prior to their death and also had no signs of foul play. Detectives believe it was just an accidental drowning and coincidence. But there were 45 deaths, all men around the same age, from death by drowning, with a smiley face left at the scene. That's not a coincidence, it's murder. In 4th place, we have the Phone Stalker. In 2007 in Washington, numerous families reported receiving death threats over the phone. Apparently, the individual on the other end of the line knew way too much about these families and used it to their advantage. Now, some of these threats included the mystery phone person saying that they would kill their children, pets, or other family members. Every time they received a call, it would appear on their phone as restricted. Some families even received recordings of their own private conversations, even one that they had between a police detective. Apparently, the caller knows everything about these families, from what they're wearing, to the conversations that they've had, to where they are. They believe that this caller was using their own cell phones to spy on them, and they managed to do so even when the phone was off. One family by the name of the Q Kendall family even changed all their phones and numbers, and the caller was still able to contact them. This person tormented the family for months. When they got a new security system installed in their house, this caller called them and commented on how they knew their passcode and could enter their house. This continued until one day the torment just stopped. But the caller was never caught. That would definitely make a good stalker movie. This person has some Joe from the Netflix show You vibes, that's for sure. Coming in at number 3, we have the Circleville Writer. In 1976, individuals in Circleville, Ohio started receiving handwritten letters from a mysterious person. Now, similar to the Phone Stalker case, this anonymous person knew personal details about these individuals. However, there weren't any cell phones that they could use to tap into. Yet they claimed to always be watching these individuals. In one of these letters written to a woman named Mary Gillispie, she was accused of having an affair with the school's superintendent. She worked with the school as a school bus driver. Her letter read, "I know where you live. I've been observing your house. I know you have children. This is no joke. Please take it seriously." Then Mary's husband Ron received a letter informing him that he would be in danger if he didn't stop the affair. Mary continued to get more letters. Another one read, "Mary, you have had 2 weeks and done nothing. Admit the truth and inform the school board. If not, I will broadcast it on CBS, posters, signs, and billboards until the truth comes out. Shortly after, the letters stopped. Until August 17th in 1997, when Ron received a phone call from this writer. As a result, he got in his car with a gun and headed out. He passed away later that day from crashing into a tree, and his gun had been fired. No one knows why or how this happened. The notes continued to terrorize this family all throughout 1983. Some were even addressed to Mary's daughter. The Circleville Writer went to the extreme when one day Mary was driving the bus down the normal route when she saw signs exposing her had been placed throughout the route. When she went to remove them, she saw that it was rigged with a gun. Therefore, if she would have gotten rid of the sign in a certain way, the gun would have gone off and killed her. Now, this gun was linked to her former brother-in-law, Paul Fresher. Paul claimed he was innocent, but was still sentenced to 7 to 25 years in jail. However, he was not the Circleville letter writer. And in fact, he started to receive notes too while in jail. One letter wrote, "Now when are you going to believe you aren't going to get out of here? I told you 2 years ago, when we set them up, they stay set up. Don't you listen at all?" So he was set up by the Circleville Writer. To this day, no one knows who the writer was. Now, when I was reading about this, I thought it would make a great film about a man who targets people who have sinned and forces them into confessing, or else he kills them. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's already been made, but I mean, it's a pretty solid idea in my opinion. Coming in at our second spot, we have the Pollock Twins. So this starts off on the more sad side. On May 7th, 1957, two sisters named Joanna, age 11, and Jacqueline, age 6, were hit by a car on their way to church. The parents, Florence and John Pollock, were grief-stricken. But the father always remained hopeful, saying that his daughters would come back to them, even saying that they were going to be reborn in the form of twins. Well, in 1958, Florence gave birth to 2 twin girls, just as her husband predicted. They named them Jillian and Jennifer. Now, the weirdness doesn't stop there. Apparently, these twins had eerie resemblances to their previous daughters. Jillian was more slender, just like Joanna was, and Jennifer was more stocky, just like how Jacqueline was. Furthermore, Jennifer had trouble writing because she would hold the pencil in her fist. That was exactly how Jacqueline would write as well. The twins also asked for the same toys that Joanna and Jacqueline had, even naming the dolls the same. That's not all. Jennifer had the same birthmark on her waist that Jacqueline had, and Jennifer had a birthmark on her forehead that was the same spot where Jacqueline had a scar. The girls were also terrified of cars and crossing the street. There are so many more resemblances between the twins and the daughters that passed away. Like how the girls once were caught playing and were talking about an accident that killed Joanna and Jacqueline, saying details that they couldn't have known, especially since the parents kept the past from them. Wow. What do you guys think of this one? In our number 1 spot, we have the death of Eliza Lam. Now, this is a truly scary story enough on its own. Eliza Lam was on vacation staying at the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. This 21-year-old Canadian was traveling by herself, journaling about her travels along the way. On January 31st, that was the last time she had been seen. Now, the only lead that we have is from the elevator's surveillance footage. This shows her final moments before her disappearance. Now, this footage is quite disturbing. She is seen behaving out of character. She is talking to herself, moving her hands randomly, pressing random elevator buttons, opening and closing the elevator doors, and peering around the elevator corner. A few days later, hotel guests reported the water in their hotel rooms was running black, and they claimed that the tap water was tasting weird. On February 19th, Eliza's body was found rotting and bare in the water tank on the hotel's roof. Her death was labeled as accidental drowning, but everyone believes otherwise. Now, in order for Eliza to have gotten into the water tank, she would have had to gone up to the 15th floor, taken a staircase up to the roof, and turned off the roof alarm. From there, she would have had to climb onto the platform where the hotel's water tanks are, and then up another ladder to get to the tank that she was found in. Now, how did she do this undetected? Especially since the roof has an alarm system and was locked. As a result, people believe that she was possessed or that she was playing the elevator game. The elevator game is said to be the world's most dangerous game. Basically, you have to be in an elevator that has at least 10 floors. When you're in the elevator, you have to press the floor buttons in a specific order. After doing so, you press the 5th floor and a woman will enter the elevator with you. This woman is not alive and it is deadly if you look or talk to her. Then you are supposed to go to the 10th floor, which brings you to another dimension. Sounds like a pretty terrifying horror movie to me. Let me add that this story took place in the Cecil Hotel, which has a grim past already. Richard Ramirez committed 14 murders and lived on the 14th floor in 1985. Jack Unterweger was another killer that stayed in the hotel, and in 1962 a female host guest jumped out of the hotel's window to her death. So yeah, this hotel alone is a good place to base a movie off of. There's just so much in the history.
Coming in at number 10, we have The Woman in the Cupboard. Now this one is really strange, really odd. In 2000, a man in Japan became suspicious when food started disappearing from his apartment. So the man decided to set up cameras all around the place in the hope of catching whoever was doing this. When he got home the next day, he looked at the camera footage and he was very creeped out to see a woman walking around his house. He thought she was a burglar and she'd just come to steal some stuff when he was out, and so he rang the police. But when officers searched the place, they found a 58-year-old woman hiding in the top of a cupboard designed to store bedding and mattresses. What? This was just enough room for her to lie down, and she had been living in the cupboard the whole time, lying there perfectly still in the dark, just meters away from him, waiting for him to leave so she could use the house as if it were her own. Now I don't know about you guys, but I think I'm going to do a quick check of every single cupboard in my house when I get home, and by quick I mean 10 hours.
Moving on to number 9, we have the Tylenol Killer. Tylenol is supposed to help you with pain, not cause you any. Well, in 1982, a number of deaths occurred due to someone lacing the drug with cyanide. Now this was back in the day when drugs like these didn't come with a proper seal, there would just be a cotton ball shoved inside. 12-year-old Mary Kellerman was the first victim and died shortly after taking the pill. After that, 3 members of the Janus family all passed away after taking a Tylenol. More individuals continued to pass on unexplainably until a nurse discovered that it was from the tampered Tylenol. In fact, the pills were so strong that one capsule could have killed thousands. After investigating, they found that multiple Tylenol bottles were contaminated from different stores around Chicago. Now, officers believe that this was the works of Ted Kaczynski. He was a mathematical genius, but gave up that career and started to live a more darker life. He already has been convicted of 3 counts of murder. However, there is still no solid evidence pinning him to being the poisoner.
Moving on to number 8 now, we have the Silent Twins. Jennifer and June, the Gibbons twins from the UK, were known as the Silent Twins because they only ever talked to each other. Their sisterly love, and then there was this. The girls were absolutely obsessed with each other and gradually began to shun the community around them, who were not very welcoming to the girls. Eventually, they developed their own language and started communicating and committing crimes together, such as arson. This led them to be committed to a mental health institution for 14 years. June later said the whole thing went too far, and although we longed to be normal, we couldn't break out. It was too late, we were twins, but our personalities clashed. She wrote in her diary that her sister was a dark shadow, robbing her of sunlight. Now psychologists deemed them deeply disturbed, and the girls felt so trapped, they said the only way that one of them could lead a normal life was if the other one died and freed them. The day after they were released from the institution, Jennifer died from a rare heart inflammation. June began to speak to others and went on to live a normal life for the first time. She wrote the epitaph on her sister's gravestone that read, "We once were two, we two made one. We no more two, through life be one. Rest in peace." Creepy. Coming in at number 7, I'm Watching You. In 2015, a woman called Chelsea Clark from Toronto was watching movies in bed with her boyfriend. The next day, after work, she logged into her Facebook account and saw that she had a message from someone she didn't know. Now Chelsea thought this was quite strange because her settings didn't allow messages from strangers. The message was titled, "Really Cute Couple." Chelsea opened it to find a guy with his profile picture as the Joker had sent pictures of her and her boyfriend in bed the night before to her. The account was deleted soon after, and police investigations have made no leads at the moment. So, next time you're watching something on your laptop, guys, maybe your tablet or your phone at night, someone could be watching right back at you. Next up at number 6, The Cemetery Clown. In 2015, Julie Graham and her husband were driving past Rose Hill Cemetery at night when they spotted a figure climbing over the cemetery gate. They captured this picture, but it wasn't until they looped back around that they realized it was a clown. They tried to get a bit closer for a better look, and that's when they saw him standing alone in the middle of the gravestones, slowly waving at them. And yes, that is the creepiest looking wave of all time. He didn't seem scared or bothered by them at all, but before the couple could even understand what was going on, the clown slowly turned around and walked into the darkness of the cemetery. Now, when police investigated all of this the next day, they found no signs of vandalism or disturbance in the graveyard, leading many people to wonder what the cemetery clown was doing that night and if he's going to be seen again. Coming at number 5 now, we have the children. In the 90s, respected journalist Brian Bethel shared a story that changed his and many others' opinions on the paranormal. One evening, Brian said he was parked outside of a local movie theater and filling out a check for someone. Then he looked up to see 2 boys standing next to the car in the darkness, no more than 10 or 12 years old. Now, before they even spoke, Brian said he was gripped with fear. He couldn't explain why, and that it was just incomprehensible and soul-racking. Only one of the boys spoke, and they said they wanted to see a movie, but they had left their money at home and asked if Brian could give them a ride back to get their money. Now, Brian avoided looking at them because of the fear and instead looked up to see that the last show had already started and there was no way they'd make it back in time. The boy said it wouldn't take long. He said they were just 2 little kids. He said they didn't have a gun or anything. Now, that last sentence scared Brian the most, and as the feeling of terror consumed him, he realized his hand was already moving to unlock the door. That's when he looked up to see their eyes. They were deep, coal black. Brian quickly made his excuses, but as he tried to drive away, the kid started banging on the window and said,
"We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in."
Okay, at number 4, we have Robert the doll. Now, this doll was given to a boy, Eugene Otto, in 1904 by a Jamaican woman who worked with the family, who was supposedly a practicer of black magic and voodoo. She had supposedly cursed the doll because she was unhappy with how the family had treated her, and they soon reported hearing conversations between Eugene and Robert the doll. At night, his parents would hear Eugene scream, and when they ran into the bedroom, they would find the furniture around Robert had been thrown around. When the family left to go on trips, the neighbors reported seeing Robert move from window to window of the house, and they would sometimes hear the doll let out a terrifying cackle. Over time, the house was sold on to a new family, but the doll remained there. The new owner, a 10-year-old girl, also screamed in the night and claimed that Robert would move, and that one time he even tried to attack her. These days, he sits in the Fort East Martello Museum in Florida and was the inspiration for the horror movie Child's Play. Moving on to number 3 now, we have Murder Castle. In 1886, pharmacist H.H. Holmes bought a number of properties in Chicago that left him owning an entire city block. He began renovating them into a hotel. He would hire some workers for one part and others for a different area, so nobody really knew the full extent of the hotel's layout. It was finished just in time for the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, where people from all over the world descended on the city. But this wasn't a normal hotel. Almost every part of it was some sort of torture chamber. For most of that year, he trapped unsuspecting guests in their rooms to kill them. There were gas chambers and also rooms to suffocate people or starve them to death, as well as a hanging room. I'm not even sure what a hanging room means, but sounds pretty nasty. The whole building was designed to confuse the victims and give them a false sense of hope. There were staircases that led to absolutely nowhere and doors that were totally bricked off. Once they were dead, Holmes disposed of the bodies through a specially designed chute to dump them into the basement and then incinerate them in huge furnaces. He is known as America's first serial killer. Moving on to number 2, we have the Real Leatherface. This is the story that inspired the movies Psycho, Silence of the Lambs. So, what real life story could produce such horror? It's the story of Ed Gein. This man had a disturbed obsession with his own mother, who had raised him during the earlier 20th century, with strict religious teachings about the sins of lust and desire. Now, after she died in 1945, Ed began to spiral into the life of a serial killer. At first, he would dig up bodies of recently buried females and cut off their body parts to keep as trophies before placing them back in the graves. Then he stepped it up and began a killing spree before police finally caught him. When they discovered the dismembered body of a woman in his farmhouse shed, investigators were also horrified by what else they found. A freshly cooked human heart was on the stove, ready to be eaten. He'd made drinking bowls out of their skulls, and the creepiest thing I think was what he had done with his victim's skin. He used them to make furniture, face masks, and women's clothes out of women's skin. I know the horror movie classics were inspired by this, but yeah, they can't really touch on how creepy this really was. And finally at number 1, we have the death of Elisa Lam. Elisa was a 21-year-old Canadian woman who was visiting LA in 2013. She stayed at the Cecil Hotel in downtown LA and had been calling her parents every single day on her visit, but then on January 31st the calls suddenly stopped and her worried parents reported her missing to the police. She seemed to have just vanished out of nowhere. Then on February 14th, the police released this video of her behaving very erratically in the hotel elevator. She seemed to exit and then re-enter, and then started making some sort of gesture to something in the hallway outside. At one point, she simply crouches as if to hide from whatever is out there. Eventually, guests of the hotel started complaining about the water, saying it was black, foul tasting, and had low pressure. Now when staff went to investigate the water tank on the roof of the hotel, they found Elisa Lam's decomposing body. That's why the water was black. Oh god. The police don't know how she got onto the roof, which was locked and alarmed, or how she got into the tank and then replaced the lid from the inside, or what was going on in that elevator. Something really creepy. Some people think that this all points to a murder, others say it was supernatural in nature, that Elisa was actually possessed. Millions of people have now watched the infamous elevator video, and many people say something about it is very, very disturbing. Will it ever be solved?